Belfast and Bob Simon in Belfast.
Good evening. Although there still is not universal peace on earth this Christmas Day, there are hints of a renewed effort to bring one off in Vietnam. For the first time in a week, American planes paused 24 hours in their bombing of North Vietnam. But as the Christmas ceasefire period expired, American sources in Saigon told the Associated Press there had been no resumption of the bombing, no orders for it to resume, and no indication when it would. One source told the AP it appears President Nixon may be trying to crank up the peace talks again. I would think, this officer said, they're telling the North Vietnamese we'll knock this off if they'll sit down and talk seriously. North Vietnam, however, said if there was a Christmas ceasefire, it wasn't entirely observed, that American jets hit Hanoi several hours after the attacks supposedly were stopped. No comment from the Florida White House on the reported extension of the bombing halt, but in Moscow, Premier Kosygin is said to have told Hanoi he expects an immediate end to the bombing and a quick ceasefire. However, when the Russians say they expect something, it normally is regarded as a hope rather than an assumption. The American command announced the loss last week of an additional 4 planes, an 11th B-52, a gunship and a fighter bomber over the north, and a reconnaissance escort jet that crashed in Thailand, killing 3 crewmen. While President and Mrs. Nixon were hundreds of miles away in Florida celebrating the holiday, a small group of demonstrators nevertheless gathered outside the White House, and Leslie Stahl reports.
About 150 people spent Christmas Day outside the White House protesting the heaviest bombing of North Vietnam since the war began. They gathered across the street in Lafayette Park for an ecumenical church service. After the prayers for peace and the sharing of bread and wine, the demonstrators marched across Pennsylvania Avenue to deliver an open letter to the president calling for an immediate end to the bombing. But the White House Guard refused to accept the letter. A local Presbyterian minister, the Reverend George Doherty, then spoke about the halting of the bombing on this Christmas Day.
The hypocrisy of the situation is having a lull in the bombing at Christmas Day. If it's wrong on Christmas Day, it's wrong any day. We could understand having a lull in the bombing because of military reasons, but the hypocrisy of trying to say that it touches our fastidious souls to bomb on Christmas Day is the kind of hypocrisy that we're against.
The protesters then set up their White House Christmas vigil, walking peacefully in the cold as they have in the past, chanting for an end to war. Leslie Stahl, CBS News, Washington.
From Tustin, California tonight, a report on one family that has been watching with particular interest the attempts at peace in Vietnam. As had been the case for 6 years, the father wasn't home this Christmas. He's a prisoner of war. When he last saw his son, the child was 2.5 months old. Terry Drinkwater reports.
Not knowing what presents Santa Claus would bring for Christmas was the least of the uncertainties Philip Pyle faced this holiday. Until a short time ago, he thought his father would be home at last for Christmas. But Captain Darrell Pyle is still a prisoner of war in North Vietnam. The bicycle was as fine a present as any 7-year-old could hope for. But the big surprise, Dad, next year, sometime, Philip's mother explains. A week before Christmas, we first met Philip and his mother, Elaine Pyle. They were doing some last-minute Christmas shopping then, near the town of Tustin, California, where they live. Way back in October, Elaine made up a package and sent it off to her husband in Hanoi. Vitamins, dried meats, dehydrated food, and some candy. For Philip, like most youngsters in the days before Christmas, a visit to Santa. He was nervous, and his biggest wish for Christmas went unspoken. Earlier, at the local post office, Elaine mailed her Christmas letter, duplicated for her many friends. It read in part, quote, 1972 has been exciting, confusing, and as usual, a great big question mark. Philip and I really are experiencing the meaning of a family unit. When he heard the news about the POWs maybe coming home, he asked, how long do you think I could hug my dad? We all follow the news closely these days and come up with few answers. However, it looks to us as if peace is close at hand. We are planning on having Darrell home in 1973. Merry Christmas and pray for a peaceful New Year. After reading her Christmas letter, we asked Elaine Pyle to reflect on the parts of this holiday that were particularly difficult for her.
Boys, like to ride bikes. So this year I selected a bike that I felt would be maybe one he could keep for years to come. Is something that mothers don't normally do for their children. The dads have some part that they play in picking it out. Here's Christmas with no lights up, no trees up, and me with all thumbs. So I would say probably the hardest part is to do the decorations and to do the things that normally a man would do and it would come naturally to him. I have one very special friend, very special to me at this time because it's sort of a common need. She's going through the same situation. She is the wife of a POW. And I think that we have a very good understanding of each other's needs. It's kind of nice to know that someone else can use a little bit of my help. And, it's this ability to go over and feel free to help her put ornaments on her tree or, to enjoy her Christmas with her. Around the election, when, peace was really being discussed and all different people were interested and it looked like they were actually at the tables for a good purpose, I believed that the men would be home. And I did tell Philip about it at that time and said maybe by Christmas.
How was it telling him and readjusting your own thoughts, your own feelings, now that it's become clear that it isn't going to end right away?
In telling Philip, I watched him change from just a kind of a normal type child to tears in just minutes. He was so excited that it could be possible, by Christmas he'd have his own dad. And then to go back now and tell him, I don't think we need to buy the Christmas presents for him right now, and soon he will be home, but maybe not by Christmas.
Because of Philip's and his mother's high hopes that Darrell Pyle would be home this Christmas, and because he was not, today is perhaps the most painful of the 6 Christmases that they have spent without him. Terry Drinkwater, CBS News, Tustin, California.
Millions around the world today celebrated Christmas. For many Americans, it was the traditional pleasure of exchanging gifts and then settling down to a sumptuous dinner with family and friends. But for everyone, it was a day also to remember others less fortunate, the victims of loneliness, disaster, and war. Celebrating his annual Christmas Mass, Pope Paul said his thoughts were with peoples and lands where there is still war, hunger, suffering, and distress, wherever the coming of justice is still awaited. Winston Burdett reports from the Vatican.
A fanfare of boisterous trumpets as Pope Paul VI comes to the loggia of St. Peter's Basilica to deliver his Christmas message to the world. The pomp of a golden Christmas morning here at the center of world Catholicism. Military bands playing. The armed forces of the Italian Republic ranged in honor guard to salute the sovereign of the Roman Church. The Swiss guards in bright red and yellow at attention. The Pope says, Buon Natale, Happy Christmas. Sons of Rome and of the Catholic world, brothers of all the earth, I have no other message on this day, on this most human festivity. He enjoins all men to seek Christ on this day as the model of true humanity. He says, true humanism can only be Christian. Do not be afraid of calling yourselves Christians. Do you not feel as you seek to avoid and to flee Christ that he pursues you? Then, in 16 languages, he extends his Christmas wishes. In Spanish and Russian, in Greek, Chinese, Vietnamese, and in English. To all who are present, to all who hear his message by radio or television, the Pope offers his plenary indulgence. And on the city and the world, Pope Paul bestows his benediction. Winston Burdett, CBS News, Vatican City.
Even in the little town where Jesus was born, the celebration of Christmas was surrounded by reminders of the continuing troubles in the Middle East. Ed Rabel reports from Bethlehem.
As in Christmases past, the Israeli occupation forces turned the sleepy Judean hilltop town into a virtual armed camp on Christmas Eve. Set against a background of Christmas spirituality, the Israeli soldiers provided a contrast in the town that already shocks its visitors with commercialism. The Israelis brought out the guns because of Arab guerrilla threats to attack the town on Christmas Eve. But the only thing approaching an attack came from the sales-minded merchants of Bethlehem. Yet the pilgrims continued to come, the churchmen in priestly robes and the children of the church. The Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, James Joseph Beltridi, in a solemn procession to the Church of the Nativity, built at the site where tradition holds Christ was born in a manger. In spite of its holy places, however, Bethlehem is mainly a secular town. 25,000 Arabs live here, surviving mostly on the spendings of tourists. They know that Christmas will bring thousands to their town, like choir members, all the way from Georgia and Texas. Manger Square gathered many types of persons to celebrate the coming of Christmas in their own way. The churchmen retreated to the inner sanctums of their churches to celebrate in solemn, splendid services. Ed Rabel, CBS News, Bethlehem.
Former President Truman is barely clinging to life this evening. From Research Hospital in Kansas City, Ike Pappas reports.
The news from Mr. Truman's sixth-floor room tonight is the worst it has been since the former president entered Research Hospital December 5th. He is quite near death, his life signs fading. The dire word made this an even quieter Christmas here. Last night, some carolers toured the hospital, but they were not allowed near Mr. Truman's wing. They stopped off at the makeshift newsroom set up in the hospital's gym to try to bring some vocal holiday spirit to the 30 or so newsmen inside, some of whom have been keeping the Truman Vigil from the start. And as Christmas morning dawned, relatives and friends brought gifts to patients, while in Mr. Truman's room, doctors and nurses struggled to prolong his life. A morning bulletin showed they were not succeeding.
President Truman's condition continues to deteriorate. In the doctor's opinion, death could occur within hours.
Mr. Truman's wife, Bess, is at his bedside tonight, but he is unaware of it. The doctors say that he is totally unresponsive, in a deep coma. Death could come, they feel, at any moment. Ike Pappas, CBS News, Kansas City.
Governments, organizations, and private citizens from around the world today sent aid to the earthquake-stricken city of Managua, now only so much rubble. The United States supplied the city with doctors, nurses, medical supplies, and, of great importance, water purification systems. In addition, the White House ordered further aid, including an Army engineering company from Panama, 1,500 tents, and 500,000 pounds of rolled oats and flour. David Dick reports on the Nicaraguan capital today.
Fires continue to break out in what used to be the business district of Managua. Weary firemen respond to keep the flames from spreading. At times, the fear of a building on the verge of falling sends people running for safety. With so much of this city of 400,000 lying in ruins, the government has urged mass evacuation to outlying towns. But many families this Christmas Day in Managua have no place to go, or if they do, no way to get there. And so, in a kind of Nicaraguan grapes of wrath atmosphere, the homeless set up temporary housekeeping on the sidewalks. One family swept its little portion of pavement, and the members seated themselves as if to serve notice that they have not lost all hope. A short distance away, a child ponders the spectacle of death. 2 bodies, unburied, unclaimed. 2 of the estimated 2,000 who were killed by the earthquake. The smell of death is in the air. The people sense it and have moved away. Someday, Managua will be rebuilt. The existing buildings must be surveyed to determine the extent of their damage. Perhaps whole blocks will have to be leveled. Perhaps a whole new city. Perhaps, but only perhaps. possibly a new cathedral to replace the one where this year there was no Christmas midnight mass. The earthquake destroyed most of this capital city, but still there's an immediate crisis, the need for food, water, and medicine. There is little physical evidence here that this is Christmas Day. David Dick, CBS News, Managua, Nicaragua.
The Agency for International Development advises that persons wanting to help earthquake victims should send their donations to established relief organizations. Groups suggested include the Red Cross, Church World Service, Catholic Relief Service, and CARE. The agency advises against sending unsolicited goods directly to Nicaragua. There may be more poor people in America's cities than the last U.S. Census had led us to believe. That possibility raised today by Edward Blum, the vice president of the Rand Institute. Blum said there's a good chance the United States Census undercounted the number of poor and welfare cases in the big cities, and that the error would shortchange them when it comes to federal revenue sharing money. The speculation was based on a report showing that the number of welfare cases in New York City were undercounted by 39%. Not everyone this Christmas Day considered turkey with all the trimmings to be the ideal holiday dinner. In fact, the 164 inmates at Corpus Christi's Nueces County Jail in Texas said the traditional meal would be no treat. So instead, they feasted on what they requested: hamburgers, French fries, and soft drinks. Why hamburgers? Well, according to Deputy Jailer Raymond Todd, that's something they don't regularly get in jail, so why not? An uneasy holiday truce in Northern Ireland today was broken by sporadic gunfire and isolated incidents throughout the countryside. Bob Simon and John Lawrence report on Christmas in the divided city of Belfast.
The Dalzell family, Protestants, celebrate Christmas very much the way they did before the Troubles began. The boys are up at crack of dawn to see what Santa has brought. 5-year-old Gary is disappointed he didn't get the airplane he'd asked for. Mr. Dalzell, a probation officer, was held hostage by gunmen for several hours last week. Mrs. Dalzell has been worried about her mother, who lives alone on a tough block. And Mark, 9 years old, is getting very nervous about all the bomb scares at his school. But Christmas is not the time to think about these things. Christmas for the Dalzells is still a joyful occasion.
On the other side of Belfast, set apart in spirit as well as by geography, the Catholic children who live in the apartment complex known as Divis Towers began their Christmas Day before dawn. The 5 children of Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Rooney gathered together the few gifts their parents were fortunate enough to afford. Unlike many of the men in the neighborhood, Mr. Rooney has a job.
It's a mile walk from the Dalzells' home to their church. It's a walk past barricaded police stations, army patrols, writing on the walls. It's a walk they'd never make at night. East Belfast, solidly working class, militantly Protestant, has been plagued by assassinations and sectarian murders. Mr. and Mrs. Dalzell don't know who's behind the killings. They feel neither bitterness nor hatred, they say, but they are afraid.
The Rooney family goes to church regularly, past the ruins of houses that are being torn down or have been blasted by bombs. The Rooneys say they feel fairly secure in their own neighborhood, especially during the Christmas ceasefire, but they would not dare to go into a Protestant area on Christmas or any other day for fear of being shot. 11 o'clock Mass this morning was said by Dr. William Philbin, the Catholic Bishop of Belfast, who has watched the slow decay of civilized life in his diocese. The cathedral was filled as the parishioners, including Arthur Rooney's family, waited to hear what the bishop would say.
Somebody in East Belfast said to me the other day, "It's not like Christmas at all over here." It was a sad saying, but we know what he meant. He was thinking of sights and sounds which I need not catalogue, and of the atmosphere of depression and anxiety that is everywhere. Christmas brings to mind different things: lights and singing and festivity, time off from work and worry, goodwill in the widest circulation. We haven't, of course, given up the traditional observances this year, but there's little heart in them.
The McGain Memorial Presbyterian Church has less than 100 worshippers this Christmas morning. Many moderate church-going people have moved out of the neighborhood, and as those who remain become more militant, the pastor says, they seem, ironically, to have less use for the church.
I was in hospital on Friday visiting a lady of the congregation, and after some thought she said to me, as many others will say, "Do you see any solution to the situation?" And I had to admit that the mechanics of the solution don't seem to be easy. But I said to her, if Christmas means anything, it means that God is here. And if God is here, there is hope.
Well, it's the only thing that keeps us going. We must hope and trust that the love of God will be shed abroad in the hearts of men and women here in our province. It's the only hope for it, I feel.
Yes, you see, the whole point about the thing is that the people who are making the trouble are the people who don't go to church. It's not the Christians that are doing this.
Do you think there's any Christian spirit in Belfast today?
Yes, I think there's a great feeling of a Christmas and Christian spirit in Belfast at the moment. And I think it isn't shown enough on television and things like that, but it's certainly there if you look for it.
One of the Rooney children, 13-year-old Arthur, did not go to the Mass with his family this morning. He was taking part in the funeral of his friend from the Catholic Youth Club, 14-year-old Denise Taggart, who died on Wednesday after being struck in the head with a stone someone had thrown at the soldiers. John Lawrence with Bob Simon, CBS News, Belfast.
That's the way it is. Monday, December 25th, 1972. And now, from all of us here at the CBS Evening News, to all of you, a very, very Merry Christmas.
This has been the CBS Evening News with Walter Cronkite.